This is Lesson 3, Developing Complex Cultures. Open your Savas if you plan to use Savas, or you can open this video. Also, you'll need to open your digital notebook, which is in your Google Classroom under Topic 1, Lesson 3, Developing Complex Cultures. Open that digital notebook. Let's look through it quickly. The first page are vocab words, as is the second page. You have 5 vocab words that you already defined on your Frayer. Page 3, you have 2 questions. Page 4, you have 2 questions. I see a quiz question right there. Page 5, you have 3 questions. Page 6, you have 3 very important questions. I would try my hardest to not miss the day that we go over page 6. And page 7, you have 3 more questions. And again, number 9, another quiz question. So let's go ahead and get started with the lesson.
Lesson 3. Developing Complex Cultures. Over millions of years, many groups of early humans appeared and then died out. Homo sapiens, or modern humans, were the last of these groups to appear. As you will read, scientists still have much to learn about the development of the first modern humans. But one fact is clear. These large-brained, wise people were often on the move. Over many thousands of years, they spread out to populate, or become inhabitants of, almost every land area of the world.
Let's go ahead and watch this video. It's migrating and adapting to new environments. If you are in class, I'm sure I will play the actual video from Savas.
Imagine that you have always lived in a cold, snowy climate. This has been true for as long as anyone can remember. Then, gradually, the climate starts to get warmer. Glaciers shrink and melt. Ocean levels rise. Many plants and animals can adapt quickly, but others cannot and gradually die out. This is no longer the land your people have always known. That is what humans faced as the last ice age ended about 10,000 years ago. Plants flourished. Some trees now grew farther north to areas that had once been covered with ice and snow. But many species of large animals, like the mammoth and ground sloth, died out as the ice age ended. Now humans needed to find something else to hunt and eat. But how? Remember, most people were still hunter-gatherers. Now some turned to fishing or found smaller animals to hunt. But others looked for new ideas and new ways to live in this new and different environment. The changes they made were so great that this period is called an agricultural revolution. How might this revolution have gotten started? Among hunter-gatherers, women had always collected fruits, seeds, and other food from plants. When they returned to the same place the next year, they noticed that where they had scattered seeds, new plants had grown. So they began to deliberately plant those seeds and cultivate the young plants. People also found other ways to change their surroundings so they would provide more food. Sometimes people set fires to clear land for homes and farmland. When grasses grew back on the burnt land, animals like deer often came to graze. Also, sometimes edible grasses and grains sprang up there. Some of those early changes were just lucky accidents. But then people began to deliberately change plants and even animals to make them more useful and easier to depend on. They picked the grains and grasses that grew best, like wheat or rice or maize, and carefully tended them so they would give better harvests. They picked the plants that gave the biggest yields or the sweetest fruit, and carefully tended them. They dug canals to bring water to the fields or control floods. They even flooded entire fields for water-loving plants like rice. Over time, they made new tools like sickles to cut grain or special stones to grind it into flour. Some early farmers tamed or domesticated animals that had once roamed wild. Some domesticated animals, like oxen and horses and cows, lived and worked on farms. Animals pulled loads or carried people on their backs. Others provided meat and milk and hides for the family. Some, like sheep, goats, and llamas, also provided wool for clothing. And at some point in human history, a few kinds of wild wolves developed into dogs, which gradually became companions to early humans. Many places, though, were too dry or too rocky to make good farmland. Many people there didn't settle down to grow crops, but still lived as herders. These families traveled with the seasons and the times when the rains came. They moved with their flocks of goats or sheep to where the grasslands were richer or the water supply was better. This way of life would go on for thousands of years, well into modern times. Would you have chosen to be a farmer or a herder? Why?
All right, let's go ahead back to our lesson. You will see your 5 vocab words on this first page of your digital textbook. Populate means to become an inhabitant of a place. Animism means belief that the natural world is full of spirits. Domesticate, change the growth of plants or behavior of animals in ways that are useful for humans. Revolution, a complete change in ways of thinking, working, or living. And nomad, person who moves from place to place without a permanent home. Go ahead and take 5 minutes and get the definitions from either the PowerPoint, your Frayer, or Savas into your digital notebook. Let's move on to page 3 of your digital notebook. Notice I have already clicked next that one time to get to the next page in Savas.
When did people start to create art? Over the course of the Ice Age, the culture of Paleolithic communities became more and more complex. One of the most important signs of a complex culture is the existence of artwork such as paintings and statues. What can we learn from ancient cave paintings? In 1940, 4 French teenagers and their dog made a remarkable discovery. The boys were exploring a cave near Lascaux in southern France. By the dim light of their lamps, they were amazed to see that the walls were covered with paintings of horses, bison, bulls, and other prehistoric animals. Other paintings in the cave showed human figures or abstract designs. Scientists later determined that the Lascaux cave paintings dated back about 16,000 years, to the time of the last ice age. Some images were carved into the stone, but most were painted. The artists made pigments by grinding up minerals of various colors. Even older cave paintings have been found elsewhere in France, as well as in Spain. Examples of cave and rock art have also been discovered in many other parts of the world where early people lived. For example, the rock paintings shown at the beginning of this chapter are from the Sahara, a vast desert in North Africa. Stone Age artists also carved small statues. Like the cave paintings, many of these carvings represent animals. Others depict pregnant women.
Number 1, what did French teenagers discover in a cave near Lascaux? You'll find that answer in this pink highlighted text.
What does Stone Age art tell us? Early works of art such as these show that Stone Age people were capable of complex thoughts and actions. After visiting one French cave, an archaeologist commented, "The mark of human genius is here, full-blown, with its immense and eternal mystery, and with all its potential for hope in the success of the adventure of modern man. We become modest in these surroundings. A great feeling of timelessness comes from them. When we return to the surface, we can't help but question the motivations that lie behind the creation of all those frescoes. To imagine the unimaginable, in any case, in contemplating them we feel the presence of an intense, enormous will to create." Robert Beguin, The Cave of Chauvet-Pont-d'Arc. We do not know the exact reasons Stone Age people created these works of art. Perhaps hunter-gatherers believed that creating an image of an animal would give them power over that animal during the hunt. Statues of pregnant women may have been intended to bring good luck to women about to give birth. Reading check.
Number 2, what do cave and rock paintings tell us about life in the Ice Age? First of all, here are some examples of the Ice Age rock and cave paintings. You will find the answer in this green highlighted text. Let's move to the next page. We are going to skip the interactive gallery. It is something that you should probably go back and look at. It is full of different Paleolithic cave art. Very remarkable. When we click next another time, and we'll move to page 4 of our digital notebook.
What do we know about Stone Age religion? Cave paintings and other art provide strong evidence that the cultures of Stone Age people became more complex over time. Another sign of a more complex culture is the development of religious beliefs and practices. Many of these practices involve death and burial. How did early people bury their dead? Scientists have found much evidence to show that Ice Age people buried their dead. One grave found in present-day Russia contained the bodies of two children, a boy about 13 years old and a girl about 8 years old. Both children were covered with thousands of ivory beads. On his chest, the boy wore an ivory pendant carved in the shape of an animal. The girl wore a bead cap and an ivory pin at her throat.
Number 1, how were Ice Age people buried? You will find that answer in this pink highlighted text.
What were some early religious practices? Discoveries such as cave paintings, statues, and burial sites may suggest how early humans reacted to what they thought were mysterious and powerful forces. These rituals and symbols were an important part of early culture. They go beyond survival and express deeper meanings of the natural and social world. The evidence suggests that these early people believed that the natural world was filled with spirits, a belief known as animism. To early humans, there were spirits in the animals they hunted. There were also spirits in the trees, rocks, water, and weather around them. Prehistoric people may have painted pictures of animals such as bison or deer to honor the spirits of those animals and to ask forgiveness for having to kill them.
Number 2, what is the term for the belief that spirits fill the natural world? You'll find that answer in this yellow circled text. Let's click next if you're on Savas and go to the next electronic textbook page. We're also going to be moving on to our 5th page in our digital notebook.
When did people start to farm? By the end of the Paleolithic era, human beings occupied many regions of the world. They had developed complex spoken language, learned to make a variety of tools and weapons, and adapted to different environments. Yet in many important ways, their lives had not changed. They still lived in relatively small groups as hunter-gatherers, following the herds of animals that they depended on for survival. Then, beginning as much as 18,000 years ago, humans gradually began to learn a new skill that over time changed how they would live. By around 10,000 to 9,000 years ago, some communities were relying on farming for food. This development marked the end of the Paleolithic era and the beginning of what we call the Neolithic era, or New Stone Age.
All right, I'm going to pause that there. So in this blue highlighted text, you'll find the answer to number 1. What was the biggest change of the Neolithic era? This blue highlighted text, get that answer now. Let's continue on.
The prefix neo means new. Around this time, temperatures increased and rainfall patterns changed. Glaciers that had covered so much of Earth began to shrink. As the ice from the glaciers melted, ocean levels rose. Most plants and animals adapted to these changes. Fir trees, which could survive cold weather, spread north into once icy regions. Some large Ice Age animals, however, did not adapt to a warmer world and many species died out. People who had hunted some of these animals for food had to find something else to eat. Some people adapted to these changes by searching for new sources of food. They found smaller animals to hunt. People living near rivers or lakes began to depend more on fishing.
Number 2, how did Earth's climate land and water change at the end of the last ice age? In this pink highlighted text, you have two and a half paragraphs here to look through. How did that change? Go ahead and get that answer now.
How did people first modify the environment? Others learned to modify or change their environment so that it would provide more food. For example, people cleared trees and bushes by setting them on fire. The grasses that grew back attracted grazing animals such as deer. People may also have noticed that if seeds were scattered on the ground, new plants grew there the next year. This discovery led them to find ways to encourage the growth of wild food plants.
Number 3, what were 2 things that early people did to modify their environment? You'll find that answer in this green highlighted paragraph. Let's move on to page 6. This looks like a very important page with all this yellow highlighting.
How did domesticated plants and animals change people's lives? Over time, people learned to domesticate plants and animals, especially those that they used for food. To domesticate means to change the growth of plants or behavior of animals in ways that are useful for humans. Widespread domestication marked the birth of farming.
I paused there in the middle of the paragraph because from over time to farming, you'll find your first answer for number 4. What can you do with domesticated animals? So in this part of the paragraph, you'll find that answer. Go ahead and get that now.
The shift from hunting to farming was so important that historians call it the Neolithic Agricultural Revolution. A revolution is a complete change in ways of thinking, working, or living.
Number 5, what happens during a revolution? You'll find that answer in this last sentence that is circled.
Even before the agricultural revolution, wild wolves developed into dogs, which humans then domesticated. Dogs provided help in the hunt, as well as companionship and protection. Domesticated plants, or crops, became a reliable source of food. Grains such as wheat, rice, or maize became chief food sources for entire societies. Many animals also provided food, not only meat, but eggs, milk, and even honey. Horses and oxen became work animals. Sheep and llamas had coats of hair that were used to make clothing.
Number 6, why did people domesticate plants? You'll find that answer in this circled yellow paragraph. Let's move on to page 7, our last page in this digital notebook.
Domesticated animals such as horses, sheep, and cattle were easier to control. People who lived in places where growing food was difficult traveled to different places with their animals. By moving to new areas, the animals would find new grasslands to eat from. The people herding or guiding the animals would use them for food and clothing. This way of life was called pastoral nomadism. Nomads are people who move from place to place with their herds. At first, there was little difference between wild and domesticated breeds. But over time, people selected the seeds of the plants that produced the best crops to sow again. As a result, domesticated plants began to produce more abundant food that tasted better, were larger, and easier to cook. A wild tomato, for example, is the size of a cherry, but a domesticated tomato is the size of an orange. By contrast, some breeds of domesticated goats, pigs, and cattle are smaller than their wild ancestors. Smaller animals may have been easier to manage.
Number 7, what were some differences between wild and domesticated plants? You'll find that answer in this blue highlighted paragraph.
What new tools did people make? Farmers invented new tools. They used axes to cut down trees for farmland and sickles to harvest grain. The grain was then ground into flour with grinding stones or hand mills. All of these tools were at first made out of stone. Later, people mined for bronze and iron and learned how to smelt or use heat to remove metals from a material. They used these metals to create more efficient tools. That is why historians refer to different stages of early history as the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age.
Number 8, what new tools helped farmers to clear their land and harvest grains? You'll find that answer in this green highlighted paragraph. And lastly, number 9, why do you think people create new tools? This is kind of an opinion question, but there is going to be a correct quiz answer. It kind of leads you in that direction in this yellow circled paragraph. Let's go back and look at your digital notebook before the quiz. You will need to make sure you have page 1 completely filled out with those definitions, as well as page 2. All 5 definitions should be in your digital notebook to help you on the quiz. On page 4 of your digital notebook, you should make sure number 2 is answered, as that will be on the quiz. Page 6 of your digital notebook, number 4, 5, and 6 should all be answered before you take that quiz. And lastly, page 7, we just went over number 9. You should have that answer in your digital notebook.